Hello, everyone. I am really super happy to see you all, and I'm super happy that you joined. My name is Edyta Samborska, and on a daily basis, I work as Kyndryl Skytap advocate, and I'm really super excited to welcome you on today's session. So I'm happy that you decided to spend this time with us. Today we are going to talk about very interesting topic, which is foundations of IBM security defense. And I really hope that you will find this session very interesting. A few comments from my side. If you will have questions, you can leave it on a chat and we will try to address it during the webinar. If not, there will be a Q&A session at the end, so no worries, all the questions will be answered. And also, if you would like to come back to this recording, or if you would like to share it with someone else, I will be adding this recording to my YouTube channel after this webinar, so most likely tomorrow. I put a link into the chat and I hope you can see it. This is my personal YouTube channel and there will be a recording from this webinar. I think that's all when it comes to administrative stuff. So now let me pass the microphone to Richard Field. Richard Field is my colleague. He's working with me in Kyndryl Skytap. He's also a business operations director, and he's going to say a few words about our company, and also he will introduce our speaker. So Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Edyta. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session. I hope it's going to be interesting for you. So just by way of introduction, as Edyta said, I work for Kyndryl Skytap. I work in alliances. I look after partners and architecture of the Skytap solution. But just to sort of set some context, for those that aren't familiar with what Skytap is and does, Skytap is a cloud platform where we can deliver IBM Power workloads in hyperscaler cloud. In this case, that's Microsoft Azure, so we can deliver IBM I, AIX, and Power Linux in the hyperscaler clouds, just like you would with commodity workloads like x86, Windows, and so on, which is a really unique proposition. Part of that migration, one of the questions that always comes up is around security. So when you move your systems to cloud, to a shared multi-tenant offering, the question is always going to be about how do I secure it? So we work with partners like Fortra to help with security, because security is still important for IBM wherever you place it, but it becomes more important when you move it into the cloud, because it becomes more visible, shall we say. So hence why we've put this session together with our partners, with Tommy and Sandi from Fortra. And hopefully it's going to be informative. We're going to run through some basics of security. There's also a little segment where we actually sort of demonstrate some or discuss some practical ways that we've worked together on some real prospects. So with that, let me hand over to Sandi. Take it away, Sandi. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Sandi Moore here. I've been working on IBM for a couple years, 20 or plus. So anyways, yeah, so I really enjoy security. This has always been my happy place. It's something that fascinates me. And so I'm always excited to share information with people about security in general, but IBM is, near and dear to my heart. So this is always a good conversation. And Richard has a really good point there on the security in the cloud. It's, now we don't have eyeballs on our systems, they're in the cloud. It's even more important that we start paying attention to what's happening on the system. So we'll have some good information here. Yeah. So with that, I think I'll get started. Why don't we do that? Let's see if I can find the share. There we go. All right. Yeah, so, I take the concept of foundation of IBM security defense in every security in general is all about the layers. And so we have to create these layers to make the systems more secure. And in that cloud environment, of course, as we were talking about, you've got less control over the system. So we've already introduced ourselves. I am a senior solutions engineer here at Fortra. I'm also a 2025 IBM Power Champion. And so, I take my role very seriously and really want to make sure that you guys have some good information. Probably wondering why we're talking about IBMI and security, because the system itself has always had this reputation as being a very secure operating system on the market. And I like to think of it not so much as a secure platform, but as secureable. You have to take some steps to use the configurations and what's available in the system in order to get it to a more secure state. The really only true secure, 100% secure system is one you unplug from the network, and that's not really a feasible option. So we're going to use some steps here to build up that secure foundation. Now, I know that we need work on the IBMI. This is something that I see every year. We do our our state of IBMI security study every year at Fortra, and we find by evaluating customer systems that these systems need help, that there's improvement needed on every IBMI system we look at. And this study really has highlighted that the foundations are not being built as strongly as we like to see. Now, a lot of these systems, I don't know how long your IBMI has been around, but a lot of these IBMI systems have been around for 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years. And these configurations are often saved and restored, and it didn't get this way overnight. So what we need to do is make sure that we don't try to take any shortcuts. We don't have any quick fixes. Commercial tools are helpful. They can definitely create and add on to your strong foundation of security, but they have to be paired with the correct system configurations. And so this is really where we're trying to focus on getting you to the point of building those pieces and getting that set. We know security is a high importance for companies, and the IBMI Marketplace survey we do every year, which is really just looking at how all IBMI shops are using the systems and plan to use the systems. When we look at the top 5 concerns, cybersecurity is the top concern, and it has been for the last 9 years. And right now the survey is open. If you're going to participate in that, I would definitely look for the link. We can provide that for you. We can get that to Richard and Adita for you to take that survey as well. Because I'd love to see what that's going to look like for this next year if we're going to actually hit 10 in a row. So it's going to be interesting. All right. So when we look at which concerns that companies have, we see exit point security, privileged user management, compliance and audit reporting. There's a whole slew of them, and they're pretty evenly spread out there on whether or not they're in place or plan to put in place, with some pieces that I would say are probably pretty important, and we're gonna touch on here in that SIM solution there at the end of our call. But there's definitely a good approach and awareness that there's a lot of layers that can be added and should be addressed. Now, we always wonder why we don't see better IBMI security on this, and there's a couple of different things that I think have impacted it. Maybe misperception of the risk, the whole approach of security by obscurity, where nobody knows how to use the system or knows how to get to the system. Richard, I know that you've seen this too, and it's just the assumption that nobody knows how to take advantage. Priorities can change. Oh, it's a legacy system. We don't need to do anything about it. It's fine. It's been fine for 30 years. So the priorities might not be there. Maybe there's not been a focus on education around security in general. Firewall is always a good one. And then relying on those green screen only menus. Now, I would welcome you to drop in the chat here if there's any other things that are preventing you from working on IBMI security. And it would be interesting to see if there's any other thoughts on that. But it is definitely a challenge to get security to be the top focus. Now, when we look at the systems, we've already done a lot of things that are going to set us up for either good or bad. And one of those is, we've got perimeter control. So everybody has their system behind the firewall. And every once in a while I get one, yeah, actually ours isn't behind the firewall, which terrifies me. We also have workstation controls because your users are not connecting from dumb terminals. So they're on a probably a Windows workstation, and there's controls in place there that are going to be doing some of the work. But we've also gone ahead and we've given these users access to our server. And it's a core server for the business. So, this is the piece where we've done some things that are going to protect the workstation and the network itself. But now we've said, okay, well, good luck, and let's give people access. So what I want to do is kind of walk you through, there's 3 steps here for building up this security defense. And the first foundational item is your system configuration. You can't have good security without having that solid configuration. And I'll give you a couple of things here that will help. And it's really about some things that are low-hanging fruit that you should be able to tackle quickly. And then there's going to be some work that's going to be definitely longer term. It's going to be an ongoing effort that is going to have to happen. So the first thing is turning on auditing. And you'll need to determine if you have your audit log configured. If you do not have your QAudjourn on the system, this is definitely an area where this can give you visibility to what's happening and ensuring that you know who's making changes on the system, who is trying to sign on the system and is failing. And that's definitely something that is going to give you visibility to people trying to guess at passwords, potentially threat actors. I've seen some really interesting scenarios where we've had a failed sign-on attempts and the profiles were not IBM profiles. So, having that visibility and understanding who's trying to get in the system. Once you've determined what you're going to be auditing on the system, then you need to decide how you're going to keep the information. How long are you going to keep it? Are you going to keep an eye on what's happening so you can react to security activity, suspicious activity quickly? If you're doing high availability, replication, you might be using the audit log, but you're probably not keeping that data long enough for it to be helpful. So it's definitely one where putting a bit plan in place. There is a lot of information available online that will help you to be able to get that audit log configured. I know that the folks there at Kyndryl will be able to work with you on that as well. So really big step in having the black box recorder for the system so you know what exactly has happened. All right, so once you get that turned on, we also want to start looking at strengthening at our user profile security. And, those user profiles, you usually give an employee access to the system on the first day they're employed, and that's like the last time that you look at that profile. If they leave, you might be disabling the profiles. But it's something that is definitely overlooked. They get disabled on the network, they get disabled that way, but we don't typically think to go back and get rid of them off the IBMI. So really important to be ensure that you are disabling user profiles when they leave. When you disable that user profile, there's a couple of extra things you can do to reduce the security risk. So disable the profile, set their password to *none, their initial menu *sign-off, or initial menu *sign-off, initial program *none, and even attention program *none. So we're stripping down those profiles if you're not going to be deleting them right away. Ultimately, you want to delete unused profiles. If that user is not tied to an employee that's still there, they really don't need to have access to your server. And there's always a potential that somebody's going to do something on the system, set up a batch job that runs into their profile. It's still going to run when they're disabled. So they can still actually pose a security risk long after the users have left your employment. You also want to make sure that you're not using default passwords. Something that comes up quite a bit for us is that we see that users are created on the system. They're, get back to the first day of work and they have a default password. So my username and password is the same. That's actually low-hanging fruit for a threat actor. So we want to make sure that you're paying attention to the default passwords and even consider using a corporate default. So instead of username and passwords the same, so user profile Sandi, password Sandi, use something like Fortra 1, and that could be the default password for new employees so that at least it's not matching the user ID. You can actually run a report to find that, so that can help you. There is a command that's analyze default password, and there's also a menu option on the IBM Sec Tools menu. So that is actually pretty easy to find. Just make sure you clean up that spooled file when you're done. You don't want to leave it out on the system. If you have a bunch of admins on the system, they can certainly get to that spooled file, and now they know all the users that have easy passwords. Another really low-hanging fruit there is to remove command line authority. And command line access is one, if you're relying on menu security, green screen, application controls, users with command line access can, even if they don't have a command line on their initial menu, they can actually get to a command line eventually. Forcing errors in an application, you will end up at a command line. So making sure you're reviewing your profiles and setting them to limit capability, yes. That is probably one of the first things you want to knock down if you're primarily relying on a green screen environment. So a lot of this information can be found, again, through commands on the IBMI. You can use a print user profile command, prompt it, select the password info for the unused profile so you can see how long a profile's been on the system, if they've actually ever signed on. Those default passwords, I gave you that command, but also the print user profile command for the odd info is going to give you that command line authority. So that's going to help to ensure that you guys are aware of who's on the system. Another thing that is very often overlooked is IFS shares. And it does create a pretty easy access to your system. Discoverable shares, these don't need to be mapped to become a threat. And we'll talk a little bit more about where that can come into play in a minute. But it's definitely a good practice. And if you weren't aware, at 7.6, they actually added an audit entry. For that audit journal I recommended that you create, there's a new audit journal entry when you create a share. Before 7.6, however, there was no record of a share being created. So it is a good practice to regularly review those shares. If you don't need it or you don't know who created or why, I would probably remove it. You definitely don't want to share your root directory either. If you're not familiar with the root directory, it's well, basically / it is the entire system. The root directory, if you look at the integrated file system, it includes qsys.lib as a folder, and that is your operating system. So it is encompasses the entire system. So if you have a share over that, it does expose the entire system. There's some additional controls you can add with an authorization list that will help to reduce the exposure to qsys.lib, but it is still not a good practice to share root. And then, of course, when those shares are unavoidable, consider making them read-only. And this is really about, ensuring that things only leave the system and that nothing gets onto the system that is inappropriate. And I always remind folks that read is use, which is a potential exposure. So if you have sensitive information, those read-only shares, it can be a place where information can leak off the system. All right. So I kind of alluded to it with the conversation about the sharing. But the second layer that is crucial to all systems, and remember, this is your basics. This is your foundation of security for the system. Every IBMI should be taking these things into consideration. Virus protection is one of those that is often overlooked. Most people assume that these power systems can't be infected because of the nature of the green screen environment. And, there was a time where there was some information that might have been shared along the way that made it sound like the IBMI was completely immune from malware, but it's really not. The integrated file system can act as a very happy host to malware. We've seen it happen. So web shells on systems, this is actually one of the most current threats that I'm seeing is there are, in fact, web shells running on IBMI, and these can run. These are actually running as opposed to just sitting out there waiting for somebody to get to a system. This is actually web shells that can potentially create backdoors to your IBMI. So it is a current threat we need to address. Trojan horse programs have been found on IBMI multiple times. Not only are they being found on the system, but they're being found in some of the IBM directories as well. QOpenSys, QIBM directory. These are going to create environments where users with access to those shares or to the file server can potentially have that malware spread off the system, but can also impact their workstations as well. And of course, ransomware. It is the most common threat, and it is threats that I think we're all familiar with, unfortunately. If you haven't been hit by it yet, it's going to be a matter of when, how bad is it going to be? And what we don't want to see is that your IBMI and the IFS is part of that. And so there's definitely some things you can do. First step, of course, is to look at those shares. When you have that root shared, you can end up with a system with your entire IFS infrastructure encrypted by ransomware. We've had that happen, unfortunately, more than once. It continues to happen. And having these that malware on the system, even with good protection on the workstations, users can disable it. And I will remind you that it only takes one user. It doesn't take everybody with all the protections. It takes one user to create an environment where it can actually get to your server, and it can be catastrophic. So we want to make sure that we're not actually leaving the system vulnerable, because data theft is a real problem. Data being held for ransom and data being destroyed, and anybody is a target. There is no company out there that is going to be immune. It can be a matter of if you are who you do business with, what kind of business you're in, and what kind of companies you do work for, where your company is. So all of these things do make us targets, and this data is gold on the black market. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving it vulnerable that way. With viruses on the network, it can happen multiple ways. We've seen activity mostly through shared IFS directories, and through those shares, map drives, FTP. So if you're not watching or monitoring FTP on your system, you have that available. We'll talk a little bit more about FTP in the next section, but it is very easy to upload files and objects to your system. NFS mounts create a very easy cross-platform backups. If you were, let's say you get hit by malware, you clean up the system, you go and restore from backups. How far in your backups do you have to go before you have clean files and you don't have that malware on the system anymore? And high availability, while it's great for recovering from disk failures and other hardware issues, it is not very good at preventing malware attacks. I mean, what's going to happen is your production system gets hit, and that change, that encryption from ransomware or the malware itself, is a change on the system that's going to be replicated to that HA system. So there's definitely some strategy to figuring out, how is your system vulnerable and where you need to make some changes or make some considerations and having a plan for recovering from an attack versus recovering from hardware or other software issues. Of course, you're going to have anti-malware, antivirus in other places on your network. It's going to be on your workstations. It's going to be your firewall is going to be helping with that. But if all of these layers were perfect at doing their job, we would not be having these conversations. So these infections can still happen. Zero-day exploits, somebody planting a web shell backdoor on your server so that they can come back later on and attack after you've recovered from the initial attack. Failed virus signature updates, deactivated or blocked virus engines. So there's a lot of different things that can make it so that the environment is vulnerable, even with all the layers in place. I mean, that's the whole point of security, is about putting those layers so that each layer should be slowing down and preventing. And if that one fails, you have another layer behind it. So we need to get to the core server and make sure that it has this protection as well. So native virus scanning. This is really about tying into the infrastructure that IBM created back at V5R4. What am I saying, 7.4? That was a long time ago. V5R4, that was 23 years ago. Full integration with the antivirus engine that they provide. So there's going to be an infrastructure, there's exit points, there's system values and attributes on the stream files that are going to support this native virus scanning. So much better than trying to do this through a connection from a Windows server where you actually have to create a share and use a high profile or a privileged profile to be able to access the system. And then now you're dragging everything across the network. So you're actually creating more problems if you're not using native virus scanning. So when you're using the native virus scanning, the system is going to actually be able to mark those files as infected if it finds them. And it's going to be able to do an incremental scanning. So it's not going to have to scan every file every time somebody opens it throughout the day. You're actually going to be able to scan the files when they're changed and ensure that you are targeting the files on the system that are going to be the most vulnerable. So doing regularly scheduled scans as well. So really fully integrating this into the setup on the system. Now, IBM created all the infrastructure, but they actually didn't create the scan engine. And that's where our PowerTech antivirus from Fortra is going to come in. And we've worked with Kyndryl to do this and help bring this to you as customers to ensure that you are able to scan your native virus system, your native file system with PowerTech antivirus. So we're going to be able to scan these files as they are opened by the users. We'll be able to scan them through a batch scan. So really targeting those high-risk areas first and making sure that the system's not spreading malware out, but also ensuring that it's not hosting that malware. So really focused on the content here and ensuring that we're scanning and that the system itself is not part of an outbreak and not the catalyst for a major attack. We're also going to be able to provide enhanced ransomware protection because that really is another, that high profile threat. And what we're going to be able to do there is actually monitor the user behavior. So we've gone from content on the system and malware on the system to monitoring the behavior of the user making changes to the system. And in order to do that, we're going to be monitoring with an exit program that runs on the file server and looks for the malicious access pattern that is typical of a ransomware attack. And so we're going to be able to actually see the users doing their read, rename, encrypt, delete. And when that access pattern becomes suspicious and hits the threshold that you've determined is appropriate for your environment, we're going to be able to stop that attack. And really crucial for protecting the IFS and the entire IBM system, anything that you've shared during those attacks. So essentially cutting off that attack and preventing the system from being damaged. So really critical layer here, right? So now we already have the users have access to the system. Now we're going to say, all right, that's great. You can have access to our system, but we're going to make sure that you're not attacking the system, or whether they know they're attacking it or not, the user doesn't really usually know. Their system is compromised, their laptop has been clobbered, and it is now attacking the system. All right, so we've got our good user configuration, our good system configuration, we've got our virus protection. Now we need to talk about exit programs. I briefly mentioned it when I was talking about the anti-ransomware protection, but this actually takes it a step further. And with exit programs, it's going to give you the ability to take away that security by obscurity configuration you have now. That's because that menu security is limiting the applications or options that the user can do. It masks what their actual abilities are on the system. If they have admin rights on the system, all objects, secadmin, job control, spool control, save sys, there's 8 different authorities. And these users may have these authorities. They don't know it, but they actually have it. And through the applications, they're restricted. So maybe they're not aware. They haven't been able to figure out a way to take advantage of it. Application security does the same. It's going to mask what a user can do. It restricts the function if they're going into the application itself. These approaches are definitely the most relied on, and it's what we see most often. And what it's doing is it's masking that complexity of the object level security. So we've got your database files, your programs, your commands, all these things have authorities assigned to them as well. And even though a user may not be able to see it directly, or they know that it's there, they can still take advantage of it if they have an unsecured interface. And so what we've got is this green screen environment where you've got the ability for users to access the system through the applications, that command line restriction, and you might have a web interface or a GUI interface for your application as well. And so the users can be able to have their controls there. But when we start talking about these non-green screen interfaces, ODBC, FTP, DDM, file server, all of these interfaces, they're going to bypass these application menus and the command line restrictions. So whatever the default authority is for that user on the system, with these interfaces, they're going to be able to jump directly from their workstation to the system, and even worse, you're not going to have visibility to it. So this ability to bypass these controls that you rely on is definitely where we have a lot of concern. And so this is that last layer, that third piece of security that needs to be put into place so that you can actually start controlling it. Now, just make sure you really can visually see what I'm talking about. There's different ways to see data. This is outside of your application. This is outside of the green screen. There's options that are built right in to ACS. So IBM provides us our emulator. There is built-in data transfer options. There's the integrated file system utility. No sharing required here. And data can be seen. And that's, of course, unfortunately, there's no visibility to it. So if somebody is using these interfaces, you have no visibility. We need to get visibility to that. We need to see how people are actually getting to the information on the system. If you have any sort of compliance mandates, this is crucial to have visibility because you cannot prove what somebody's done if you can't see it. Another way to see data. This one doesn't require actually even ACS. You don't need that. All you need is a DOS command window and access to Google and Google those commands, and you've got the ability to navigate a server and the SQL scripts as well. So it's very easy to see data on the system if you have read authority. If you have change authority, you're going to be able to use all of those same interfaces we were just looking at, but you're going to be able to put objects on the system through FTP. You're going to be able to upload a file to the system through the integrated file system. Now you've got files that are overwritten, and you can data transfer. You can actually upload that way. So sending files to the system. And again, there's no visibility to this without an exit program in place. So now we've got these modified objects on the system. We don't know how it happened. And then even the ability to maintain your objects. And I say maintain in quotes there because what I mean is delete, right? So if somebody is maintaining an object and they delete it, you need to be able to know how it happened, who did it, what interface were they using, because you sure as heck didn't mean for them to be able to delete the files on the system without you knowing about it. So the ability to get through to the system and do these types of changes is terrifying for me. I hope that you're concerned too. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this layer of control. This is the third piece, the exit programs. These can be assigned to each of those entry points of the system. I like to describe the IBMI as a building. The green screen's your front door. All of these little interfaces we're talking about here, these are your side doors of the system. They don't have security cameras over the door. All somebody needs is the key, their user ID and password, and they're going to be able to get into these side doors. So what we need to do is put that security guard at the doors and determine whether or not we're going to allow them to use these particular entry points to the system. And if we do, what are they going to be able to do? So we're going to get these exit programs registered and ensure that we're putting some control in place. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that most threat actors are not going to be using a green screen to attack a system. So these are going to be the most attacked interfaces, and we don't have the visibility. We don't. So we need to make sure that we're preventing this access for unauthorized users, and that we're aware of when somebody's attempting to use them and they're not authorized. So that's what those exit programs, we want them to make sure that they are doing the things that we want. We want them to prevent access that's unauthorized, and we want to allow the approved access to continue because the systems need to function. So by allowing this activity that is approved to continue, and then alerting when we see some suspicious activity happen. So getting exit programs on the system there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can write your own. Most companies do not have a full-time programming staff that's going to be able to write exit programs beyond a simple block all traffic. So this is really where you want to lean into using a commercial solution to be able to ensure that it's going to be compatible with each operating system release, that you don't have your own programmers controlling their own activity. If they're the ones who are going to go rogue, they're going to know how to undo it. And then making sure that you are considering performance on the system. ODBC transactions can be really heavy, millions of transactions within just minutes. And so you need to make sure that you are writing the program so that it is going to be able to handle that traffic and not create issues for you. So your third piece of the foundation there is our PowerTech Exit Point Manager from Fortra. And so this is going to provide you the ability to see who's connecting to the system through all of those interfaces we were just talking about. It will allow you to audit the access, understand what's happening, then start creating rules to allow the approved traffic to continue. Because we need to use our systems, so we need to make sure that we're giving the right people access. And then once we've determined we've identified everybody who is approved to use our system through all of these interfaces, we're going to go back and we're going to say, you know what? We're going to deny by default now. So getting to that point of, if you're not on my approved guest list, you're not getting into my system. So they really layer well together. Each of these pieces of security we've been talking about, crucial, right? Building that solid foundation with a good system configuration, scanning the system for your most common threat, and making sure you've got that virus protection layer in place, and then the exit programs. Now we know who's connecting to the system, how they're connecting the system, and we're going to ensure that people do not need to be using the system to access data without our knowledge. Not going to be able to do it. So it really is about building that solid foundation so that the systems can continue to operate as expected going forward. Now, I'm going to throw a little bit of a side wrench in here. So I talked about the foundation, but let's say you guys get all of this work done. You've done all this good system configuration. You've added the virus protection. You've added the exit programs. Now you've got all this valuable information. We know what's happening on the system, who's watching it. So what you can do, your last step there is going to be to integrate it into your SIM solution. So the security information event management is a critical part of any infrastructure, but the IBMI is really the blind spot there. And once you get all these good things set up and your security is solid, and is anybody paying attention? So this is where we can use our PowerTech SIM agent. And this is going to give you the visibility to what's happening on the IBMI, but on a grander scale. So we're going to be able to pick through all of that information and pick and send up only the information that you want to send to your SIM solution. And it's with PowerTech SIM agent, we can do translations on those audit entries. If you've ever looked at some of these audit journal entries, they're not necessarily information that the team monitoring your SIM is going to understand. So being able to actually add that additional context of, hey, a new profile was created on the system with all object authority. This is a root privilege. Please validate with the IBMI team. So those are the kinds of information that are going to be helpful, but also give the context for the non-IBMI folks. Collecting this information, sending it out to that SIM to be able to understand what's happening on the system and help you monitor the security and make sure all those layers you put in place are doing their job, and if there's anything you need to address. And actually, I think we've got coming up here, Richard, you've done a really cool integration here with PowerTech SIM agent. Would you share that with everyone? Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it also gives you a break for a couple of minutes to have a
I know,
slurp of tea, Sandi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Sandi's been talking about is obviously, you're protecting your system, but you're also gathering the information which is relevant, and you are reporting that information to a central source, which has been monitored by a security team. Not necessarily an IBMI team, as Sandi has described, but it's in a central place. Now, one of the cool things that we can do here is that we can build that out in Skytap Cloud. And the advantage of doing that there is, of course, some of these SIEM monitoring tools can sit within the hyperscaler cloud. And of course, Skytap is in the hyperscaler cloud too, which brings the two things very close together and integrates with IBM running in Skytap on Azure with all of the other SIEM monitoring which is going on for other platforms like x86 Windows, x86 Linux, and so on into a central point. So the security team are seeing a single view of the truth. Now, of course, some of this functionality, the SIEM agent from PowerTech, will work in Skytap or anywhere. But what we've built out here is we have IBMI instances running in Skytap, as you can see. They're just normal IBMI 7.4, 7.5, whatever, running in Skytap. Normal green screen interface, of course, it's exactly the same, all of the same installation of the SIEM agent from PowerTech. But what we're reporting out to is an Azure-based SIEM where we're collating that information and reporting it into a single instance. And that can be, multiple different SIEM agents, as Sandi says. She mentioned Splunk and ArcSight and so on. We've tested a couple of things here: Palo Alto, which is running on an Azure VM, and also native Azure Sentinel, which is Azure's SIEM. So there's a really good integration there. It's a really good story. It brings that cloud readiness, hyperscaler readiness, to the IBMI in a way that probably you haven't seen before. So really powerful to integrate that. And if you want to know more about what we've done there and see it working, then make contact with us and we can walk you through that. But yeah, back to you, Sandi. If you've recovered and you've
Thanks.
Got a sip of water. Coffee.
I know,
Excellent.
right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and it is important in having that visibility. And I think I love to see that there's this integration here. And and Richard, you've shared with me some horror stories of security on the systems, and it resonates. And making sure that these things don't go overlooked is so important. Awesome. All right. So what are you going to do next? So there's a lot of different resources available out there. Reach out to Kyndryl and Richard and his team. And but you can also start with a free IBMI security scan. So this is something that comes from Fortra. It's our PowerTech security scan. And it not very often do you get free, but free is pretty cool. And what it does is it does a quick evaluation of some of the most common security areas on the system, and gives you a report that you can use to determine where to start. Because, I obviously threw a bunch of information at you. I talked for 40 minutes nonstop. And so it's a lot to consider. So what we like to do is offer this as well as a review, going through and talking about what the risks we found, why we think they're a risk, so you understand that it's, we're not trying to scare you. You should just be scared because you should be scared, because security definitely needs some help. So this is something that we can do, and it's a really good place to start, and you can really figure out, what to do first, what your low-hanging fruit is, right? We were talking about system configuration, but also determining where other layers of security can come into play. And I think you guys should be able to click on that learn more there, request your security scan, and request that scan from the Kyndryl team. So really great place to start. I think this is that 30,000 foot view that's going to give you guys what you need to understand what you're dealing with now, so that you know what you need to change. All right, I think we have some time for some questions.